Now, I'd like to just do a little bit of summary, if I could, just to recap that the SMART tool that we've been describing over the last few weeks, you have seen that we can use it for many different purposes. So some of you might have an interest in using it for monitoring law enforcement, monitoring patrols, monitoring the results from protection work. But here we have a tool that may be of use to many more of you, because I know that the snow leopard network is very much involved in collecting information about snow leopard densities and distributions, and also prey densities. So it may be that the Smart Ecological Records tool is very useful to you as people who are measuring animal populations. So given that, I would like to open up for questions, and I'm hoping that you'll be interested in asking questions. You can either ask questions in the chat, or you can also just open up your mic and ask us your question directly. So we have a question. So Justine has asked the question, I wanted to ask your thoughts on the following. What if our teams do not use the mobile to collect data, but they use paper and pen? Would it still be useful to then input the data into SMART to look at the coverage and survey effort? Or do you think the greatest strength of this tool is to help standardize the way data is done using mobile collection approaches?
Do you want to take it, or shall I, Tony?
Yeah, so I can take that. So Justine, it's possible to collect data in paper and pen format and type it in as a survey record by hand. And so some of your colleagues may be doing that. You may have your own formats, and your staff are already trained to do that. They don't need to learn how to use Smart Mobile to collect the data that can be inputted into Smart Ecological Records. However, it will be much more efficient. It'll be faster and more accurate if everyone can take up Smart Mobile and learn the steps in setting up a configured model and creating the template for collecting the data on the device. And so some of you may have used CyberTracker in the past. I'm aware that that's being used for doing surveys of prey in many parts of Central Asia. So Smart Mobile is essentially a more advanced version of CyberTracker that has some of the elements of CyberTracker, but it's got a lot more functions and features. Yeah, so we would encourage you, if you're interested in learning about Smart Ecological Records, to also learn about the data collection using Smart Mobile.
Oh,
and it's very easy to learn.
Yeah. I was just going to say, it's worth mentioning that we're actually trying to get a lot of our historical data into Smart ER. So there, of course, you're not using the system in your data collection, but it's a very good way of getting all your data backed up and in a standard format, which is really valuable.
So Imran has typed a question in here. Are there any good tutorials for ecological monitoring with sample data? Can you give the link?
Yeah, we have the one introductory exercise. I think that's available as part of when you install the Smart ER software, and there's the sort of introductory manual.
Yeah, so we can provide that. That actually is an exercise that comes with the technical training manual. So I'd be happy to share that with you.
And hopefully, eventually, we're in the process of putting together a more comprehensive technical training manual. And with any luck, we'll have a good draft of that in the next few months. So we'll definitely share that around when it becomes available.
All right, so maybe I can ask the question of, oh, okay, we have one more. Can you share any results after starting with SMART? From Flavia.
I'm not sure I've understood the question 100%.
I think he means that is it possible to see how data has been managed with SMART and what it looks like after it's being processed? And perhaps the answer to that is that, as you mentioned, Sam, it's possible to export data in a format that allows you to analyze the data in distance. So using a distance program, you would be producing the outputs, the regular outputs from that program, but using data that's been collected in SMART.
Yeah, and I mean, you would have the survey queries and reports that you could share.
Right, so that's the additional thing that SMART allows you to do, is to run queries of your data. So you can ask, as Sam had suggested, you can ask the question, where were surveys done where dung of Siberian ibex was detected? Where were surveys done where snow leopards were detected in the same place as prey species? So you can ask basic questions of the data set before you export it for a more sophisticated analysis in distance software. And you can also create maps. You can create maps showing the location of your observations. So for example, if you've got a survey design where you have line transects separated at a certain distance across a study site, you can create what we call an observation query that allow you to see the spatial distribution of observations of what it is, whatever it is that you're looking at. Maybe it's a particular species, or maybe it's a type of sign of a species that you're targeting. And so you can do these basic analyses in SMART. And I think in the first session, I talked about running queries in relation to patrol data. So for example, you can run a patrol query to find out where the patrols went that were led by a certain person. Well, in analyzing survey data, you can do the same thing. You can do the equivalent. So for example, maybe I want to know where Pooji did her surveys last month. I can run a query on Pooji as the survey team leader, and I can see a map showing the line transects that she walked. So there's a lot of basic information that you can create within the SMART tool that tells you about your survey data, the results of your survey. And then, as Sam has mentioned, that you can create these reports too. So you can customize reports to create little reports about the data that you've collected that take the queries and create a format for presenting those in a report. So you can have a report that has tables, that creates tables showing effort data, survey effort data, results of surveys, maps that show the distribution of observations of a target species, etc. You can create charts that will show a time series of information. So for example, maybe the encounter rates of Marco Polo sheep in your study site through time. So the monthly survey encounter rates. You can create a chart that will show you that. So that's what SMART can do. I hope that helps. We have another question from Gustav. Gustav, thanks for joining us. I'm glad that you were able to make it for the session. The application shows a lot of promise to the Global Snow Leopard EP initiative, PAWS. One can use the data collection and recording formats to estimate prey abundances, occupancy of ungulates, mapping of threats and distribution and abundance of snow leopards as well. Going forward in the future, if we can align the data requirements under PAWS with the data formatting options available in SMART, it can provide a great means to maximize value beyond patrolling. And by PAWS, I'm assuming that you mean Protection Assistant for Wildlife Security. Is that right, Gustav? That's the PAWS we're talking about. Population assessment of the world's snow leopards. No, sorry, I had the wrong PAWS. Okay, so I'm not familiar with your PAWS. But yes, Smart Ecological Records does provide us a tool for going beyond simply the collection of patrol data, so that you can start collecting information that can contribute towards the purpose of assessing populations of snow leopards. Yes, very much so.
Tony, I wondered if you wanted to sort of briefly explain the difference between SMART-ER and SMART-Collect, where, you know, in terms of complexity and where you might use one versus the other.
Okay, so SMART-Collect is a tool like Smart Mobile for collecting observational data. So instead of using your Smart Mobile application, you have an application within the interface that allows you to collect data. So we can collect records, and those records don't necessarily have to go into the patrol database. They can be incidental records of observations of animals or threats. So if you have people who are volunteers at the site, you have people who are contributing to the data through a citizen science approach, you have community patrollers or you have community volunteers, they can be taught how to collect data. Observations that may be incidental observations, random observations that are not associated with a patrol or a survey. So that data can be collected and it can be imported into SMART. And it doesn't go into the survey database. These are incidental incident records that sit in a part of the database, and you can query them, just like you can query survey records or you can query patrol records. So for example, maybe you've got your community volunteers out there looking for signs of snow leopards, and every time they see a snow leopard, they record it, and they record the size of the track, and they record the direction it's moving and the substrate and other environmental characteristics. Those incidental records of snow leopards go into the SMART database and you can query them. So I can run a query that will tell me in the last 12 months where incidental incident records of snow leopards were detected, and I can create an observation query about that. Yeah, so the Smart Collect is a tool for collecting that incidental information that can be used for understanding more about the ecology and the distribution of your animals. And it's different from surveys, it's different from patrols.
I have another question, which I can't help myself since we have Justine on the line, and I don't know if we have any of the other authors of the Double Observer Survey Manual, but I wondered whether anyone has tried analyzing those data in a spatially explicit fashion, the spatially explicit capture-recapture methods.
So luckily we have also Pustu who is here. and he is more versed on, and he would know more about that. Kustub, I don't know if you want to answer Samantha's. That is somewhere we're hoping to go towards. Kustub, go ahead.
Hi, Samantha. So to be honest, no, and largely because the data which typically is collected in the double observer method misses the does not capture that one information about spatial location. Having said that, there are some new developments which hopefully will be field tested soon, which use cluster sampling approaches using a double observer principles, but you don't need to even identify groups. So hopefully one of these surveys in the future will be able to use those. As of now, they've not been used on spatial capture framework.
Yeah, no, because I thought maybe you can, if you get the distance even approximately right and the compass bearing, then you can kind of figure out the location. Yes. And you can, within the spatial capture recapture analysis, you can also define grid cells rather than, and then you don't need to be as accurate in terms of where your locations are. So there's ways and means around it.
Absolutely.
It just seems
absolutely
it would be fun to try.
That's true. That's true. No, definitely. And that's something I think where some of the developments might go moving forward in using the spatial element of sightings for estimating abundance. So hopefully that will happen.
Very nice manual, by the way.
Yeah, all kudos to Justine, Munib, and everyone else.
Puji also.
Puji, of course, yeah, everyone.
And he was part of the pause team, right?
Yes. That's part of the pause team, by the way, Tony. Yeah.
But another point, it's interesting you said that point surveys sometimes work better. And we've found in our areas that we don't get enough data sets, not enough detections from using.
Well, I mean, you can also, there's tricks, because you can do things like have several surveys where you combine the data to at least get your detection function, even if you keep your encounter rates separate. So, or combining different species, but accounting for species in the detection function. So there's a few tricks you can try.
Okay, yeah, because we've been doing transects instead, as described in the manual, to increase that detection across those individuals, but which is less feasible in the higher mountain areas of like near the Tian Shan or the Tibetan Plateau, where distance sampling is not even distance sampling, point surveys are seem to be more accurate. I don't know if Kusubi.
That's fair enough. But yes, I mean, to be honest, Samantha, this is where the development is expected to happen in the next months or years. So yeah. But yes, so far nobody has attempted. Please do, please do. In fact, I'll share with you. There's another methodological development which I just mentioned, clusters capture, where you don't even need to recognize groups as individuals. It uses the distance between sightings as a latent variable, as a latent variable to estimate that. So that's something which also holds promise, because in many areas you do end up, when you're surveying, you have groups that split, and sometimes can create a little bit of a confusion.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's exciting developments.
There's a question from Imran. Can our long-term data on threats be used as covariate in an ecological records analysis for holistic management strategy? Sam, do you want to try a response to that one?
Yeah, we've used our data on hunting sign in ecological sort of spatial models, so models of, for example, forest elephant density. So yeah, it can definitely, most definitely be used. And we've used more often than not so far as a binary variable whether an area has eco guards or not. And that's been an interesting variable to include in the ecological sort of analyses as well. So yeah, it definitely can be combined. And I mean, we can also have long conversations about how to analyze the law enforcement data itself using, we said that I think during the first session, using something like the occupancy methods to try and make it a more robust analysis.
Can I have a question too, Tony? I wanted to ask Pooji what she felt was the main difficulty in trying to bring ecological surveys into practice in TOST. Pooji, I don't remember what you shared, but you hope to do it in the future. But is there anything that you find might limit it, or maybe, okay, sorry, maybe she's didn't hear. You're muted, Tony.
Pooji is here. She's just muted.
It's okay. Never mind. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, I would think it does require, I mean, a certain time investment to set up the ecological records and surveys that way with corresponding training. But I think there's a certain efficiency in that once you've done it for law enforcement monitoring, a lot of the skills and know-how can be transferred in terms of managing the technology itself. So that's helpful. But yeah, I mean, with this survey, ecological record side of things, you ideally want to have sort of some additional training and knowledge of, you know, design and analysis. So it's I guess an extra level of complexity that does come with it.
Yes, just added to that, when we've done the trainings, the full trainings in how to use ecological records with field practice, we've done a 6-day course, and it could have been a 7-day course. And that includes instruction in the conceptual stuff, sampling, what is a design, and how to collect data and why you collect data and what is monitoring, and all of these basic concepts. That takes up the first full day of lectures in the classroom. And then there's a couple of days of practice where we go out and we teach how to use the tool, the Smart Mobile, for collecting survey data, and then bringing the data back. And then managing the data is just 1 day. So managing the data in the Smart tool is 1 day, and then exporting it and analyzing it and using the data to create information is another day or 2. So it could be a 7-day course, and that would cover all of those different things. And if any of you are interested in participating in a course like that, we could put a course together. We could put a full ecological records course together. So let's think about that. And
I have to say, I have a very strong preference for doing it in person because it's pretty hard to teach some of these methods. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's so much nicer and more efficient to do it in person. So hopefully, eventually, we'll get over the COVID hump and we'll get our little vaccine passports or whatever it's going to be. We can make it happen again.
Another question from Justine. I had another question that I'm not sure you mentioned. Would you recommend separate transects for ecological methods following sampling design instead of using it as added on to patrols?
Yes, is the short answer. I think, I mean, you almost always get better quality data with a proper design and by having sort of biologists collect the field data. But having said that, if you don't have the resources to have those dedicated surveys and sort of biologists collecting those data, then with some care and consideration, you can obviously use data coming out of your law enforcement monitoring. It's a tricky one because, I mean, eco guards obviously are focused on not on the biological data collection, but on the enforcement work as well. And so they necessarily get distracted by having to do that enforcement work. It also depends very much on what data you ask them to collect. So for example, if you ask them to collect something that it has a low encounter rate, so I don't know, like tiger sign, you don't see that very often. So it's not a big ask or distraction for them to collect those data. So you have to think carefully if there's something that occurs pretty frequently in your landscape, you don't want to burden sort of law enforcement people with that because it's just impossible to do everything they're supposed to do.
Yeah, I was just asking that. It's very tempting just to add it on, right? Without really thinking about, like you said, the sampling and stuff. So I think, yeah, thanks, Sam. Very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the sort of the analysis of the data, when you have a nice sort of random design, you can do something called a design-based analysis, which has all sorts of nice properties. When you don't have that underlying your data, then you often have to go to sort of model-based analyses, and that can become trickier. It can work well, but you're never sort of 100% sure that you've done a good job in terms of the model you develop. So there's always a very strong argument for having underlying design.
Yeah, so maybe we could do a little poll. Maybe what we should do is in an evaluation that we're going to send out, we'll ask the question, who would be interested in continuing to learn about smart ecological records? And then let's see if that's something that we can help with in the future. Okay. Are there any other questions from any of you? Okay, so maybe I can start to wrap things up here. So the last 4 sessions have been very small snapshots of information about the smart tools. And if you want to learn more, if you really want to learn any of these tools and be a master of the tools, it's going to take a lot more training, a lot more contact time. And as Sam has said, ideally, these trainings are done in person with the trainer. So the first training was about the smart desktop and about the functions and features. The full training that we run, the basic training that will get you from zero knowledge to being reasonably competent with the use of the smart software, is about 5 days of full-time training and instruction and exercises. Once you've completed that basic training, you should be able to operate the core software and understand how to collect data, bring it in, run queries and summaries, and create reports. Those are the basic functions. With the smart mobile and the smart collect applications, which are applications that run off an Android phone or a tablet, the training to use smart mobile takes about 3 days. And that's just the nuts and bolts, basically. And then it takes practice. And then it takes time to learn how to use it. So, you know, we've got rangers out there using smart mobile for data collection. It can take 3 to 4 months to get comfortable with collecting the data, being able to go out there, make the observations, bring it back and upload it into the smart software. With ecological records, we've just started doing trainings, and we have experience with training some people in Tanzania. Our teams in the Congo have been using smart ecological records for a lot longer. They've been using ecological records for several years now. And as you saw from the data, they have actually gone a long way to using this tool, and it's become a part of what they do. So they are really the experts. There are people using ecological records in different parts of the world. We heard yesterday in the webinar, in the SMART webinar, that there are people in Colombia using ecological records for collecting data. There are groups like that who are using the tools. So you can expect, once you've done the training could take a full week or so, and once that's done, then you're going to need to practice and to use the tool and to then go through the documentation and the handbooks. And like Sam has said, we're actually in the process of developing the definitive Smart Ecological Records training handbook, and that should be available later this year. So these are three of the tools that we have in the Smart Toolbox. Then Michael Hute gave us a presentation in the second session about how you set up SMART at a site, and that can take years, okay? So Michael showed us that in the Russian Far East, his sites, the ones that he's advising and supporting with technical support, have taken 7 or 8 years now to get up and running, and to have SMART as a tool that's actually operating effectively for them. So don't expect to get results overnight. It will take time to get set up and to make SMART a part of what you're doing. And it takes a commitment. And obviously, there needs to be commitment from the people directing the project, the park director, the ecologist at the site. There needs to be commitment. If there's anything that we can recommend is that get the senior people on board and wanting to have these tools. Because if those senior people aren't really interested, then it's not going to work. Because you need them to drive it. You need to have the managers and the directors interested in having these tools for everybody else to be using them. Yeah, so 4 days, 4 sessions, 2 hours. So we've presented 8 hours of SMART, and there's a lot more that we could present. But if the Snow Leopard Network is interested in participating in trainings in the future, we'd be happy to talk to you about how we might organize that. And especially if it was possible at a time when we can actually meet you. We can go to a place and we can do an in-person training. It's probably not going to be this year, but it might be next year. And we'll still be around, and we'll still be available to help you. So yeah, so finally, I'd like to thank Sam for your great presentation and overview today. I'd like to thank Monica Harris, who's on the call today, for helping to coordinate the sessions with us. And Monica is our SMART program manager, and she's managing the relations between all of the 9 organizations that are part of the partnership. So she's got a lot on her plate. So thank you, Monica, for joining us for the sessions. Michael Hute is not here, but if you are a Russian speaker, or if you're interested in joining the session on the 1st of April, he's going to be giving his session that he gave on March the 11th. He's going to be giving that same session, but in Russian language. So you'll be hearing from him, or your colleagues maybe. So yeah, so thank you very much, Justine, Raki, Costa, and all the Snow Leopard Network for the invitation to come and present about SMART. We hope it's been useful. We hope you've learned some new things, and maybe you've got an interest in learning more. And if you are, then we'd be happy to talk with you some more. And in the meantime, if you want to contact us, we have this Google group that Raki and Justine have set up. And we're happy to answer questions that you might have for us. So please write to us through that forum, and we'll answer your questions, and we'll send you links, and we can send you resources. And the whole set of presentations that we've delivered over the last month we'll put online there for you to access. So maybe at this point, I can give you back to Justine and Raki to close the session.
Huge thank you to you, Tony, to Samantha, to Michael, Monica, and all the other speakers. It's been such a pleasure to learn from your teams, and I think there has been particular interest from many of us. I hope that, like Kustup said, we can look at other ways to incorporate SMART into programs like PAWS, the Snow Leopard Population Assessment, and you know, maybe collaborate on the ground through trainings, you know, on the ground, if remote for now, but also future on the ground trainings in Bishkek, Ulaanbaatar, or other places. So very much looking forward to continue this partnership and continue learning from you all. Please do not hesitate to share with us if you have other trainings that take place that we can share with our members. I'm sure many would be very interested. But yeah, that's all. Just a huge thank you for your time and sharing. It's been such a pleasure.